So today I want to talk about something that will be useful if you're listening to news reports that are talking about percentages, and that is the difference between a percentage versus a percentage point. And I'm just going to illustrate this with a couple of simple examples because it's an important difference. So let's think about something like tax rate. Let's say that the tax rate, sales tax on something right now, is some easy number like 10%. And there's a proposal on the table to increase it to 12%. Now, how could we describe this increase? Well, one way to describe the increase is that this is an increase of 2 percentage points. And that's because it went from 10 to 12, so the percentage, the tax rate, 10%, went up by 2 percentage points. So that's one perfectly reasonable way to describe it. However, there's another way of describing increases using percentages. And that comes from thinking of, look, the original tax rate was 10%, and then the proposed new tax rate is 12%. And the question is, how much higher is the new rate than the old rate? In that case, since the old rate was 10 and it's gone up by 2, it's gone up by 20% of what it originally was. 20% of 10 is 2. So it's an increase of 20%. So the important thing to note here is that in both cases I'm describing the exact same change. The change is from 10% to 12%. But I can either describe it as the number of percentage points that it's going up by, from 10 to 12, so that's a 2 percentage point increase. Or I can describe the increase, which is an increase of 2%, as a percent of the original, right? So for example, if I described something more extreme, so let me erase this. If I describe a 50% increase, then a 50% increase in these terms from a tax rate of 10% means it's increasing by 50% of its value, so that would equal a new rate of 15%. It went up by 5%, which was half of the original rate, which is what this 50% refers to. That's one way. But I could also describe a 50 percentage point increase. And even though I'm still saying 50, this means something very different. This means that the tax rate of 10% is now increasing by 50 percentage points. It's not that it's 50% higher, that brings me to 15%. It's that the percent itself, 10, is increasing by 50, which brings me to a tax rate of 60%. Very different. Okay? So the idea of the difference between a percentage versus a percentage point is that a percentage is telling you the increase or the decrease as a percentage of the original value. So 50% increase means take the original value and increase it by 50%, right? So 10 goes to 15, right? 12 goes to 18, 20 goes to 30, right? Increasing it by 50%. A percentage point increase is just literally changing the percentage that you started with by a certain number of points, which is how our menu described. So let's do one last example to make sure that we've got this. Let's suppose that there's some infection and it has a death rate of 2%. And then something happens, over time, maybe our treatments get worse, or more people get infected or something, and then what we end up with is new death rate of 3%. So this was the original death rate in the past, and this is the new death rate now. 2% was what it was before, 3% is what it is now. So how can we describe this increase in the death rate? Two ways. We can say that the death rate went up by 1 percentage point. Or we could say that the death rate increased by, well, if it went from 2% to 3%, it increased by 50%. And so you can see how it can be very confusing when you hear reports like this, that they sound very similar. 1 percentage point, 50%, they both have the word percent in them, but they mean, and they mean the same thing, but they sound very different. 1 percentage point doesn't sound very significant. A 50% increase, that sounds like a lot. But they're both describing the same progression from a 2% death rate to a 3% death rate.